Everyone, thank you for watching once again. Today we're going to do the third and final part of Princeton, Pennsylvania. Princeton, Pennsylvania, ESPN 30 for 30. This is going to be part 3. Also, just a couple other things as well I want to share as I'm about to sit down. We are putting together merchandise, and that's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks, which will be an enhancement of what we're doing already with the videos. So look forward to that, and that's going to be an actual assessment from literally A to Z, what to expect when you're going to see a therapist. And it'll have everything. It'll be a download of probably like 5 parts, 5 hours worth, and we'll break it down. But we'll talk about that in upcoming episodes. But that will be coming out. Also, I want to thank everybody for the comments. We're starting to finally get comments. Thank you, thank you, thank you. People are talking about the Kendrick ones. People are talking about the Prince of Pennsylvania ones. We love it. We love your comments, good and bad. Please bring it in. So again, this is Sunridge of Nevada. I am Bruce Muffson, LCSW. Little hot today because it's a hot day in Vegas. Talking about Princeton, Pennsylvania. Merchandise is coming out. This is part 3. We want your comments. Here we go. Okay. We discussed in the first 2 parts basically the dysfunction of John du Pont and where things were going. And what I wanted to clarify is that at this point, everyone realized things were amiss, things were wrong. Now, the Taras Wolochuk, the attorney, he wanted John to see a psychiatrist. And of course, what happened? John refused. There's nothing wrong with me. And that's a classic symptom. Like, you may be crazy, but I'm not. I don't need medication. This is a classic thing that I deal with every day at work, where people will say, like, I'm not mentally ill. There's nothing wrong with me. You get this denial. This is very, very normal and very predictable. People that truly need help don't want help. And that's often a frustration people don't even realize unless they're in the field. And I see this all the time. So there's a picture of John in the documentary. He's looking depressed with a blank look, and he's no longer dealing with reality. I've seen that look thousands of times. That look of, I just don't care. I'm in a different realm, different universe, literally, and reality means nothing to me. What happened is that he put in a security fence, and he could hold the team. Another sign of paranoia, find that threat. That's what he started talking about, finding the threat, the paranoia, the suspicion, classic signs of a breakdown, severe mental illness. Now, what happens is when you start thinking like this is that not good. And you start to get to the point where you start to believe fantasy and reality. This is something I want to kind of clarify, is that you can't go through life pretending. When things are amiss, things are awry, you have to say to yourself, it's not good. I have to make some changes because this person is not stable in my life. I know a lot of times people will say things to me like, well, Bruce, it's going to get better, it's going to get better. It rarely does. Unless you have an intervention of mental health, medication, a combination of both, a change in lifestyle, a change in reality, you are not going to get better, and things will get worse. So I wanted to clarify that for somebody. Another thing also is that the wrestlers were saying that his paranoia was eating at him more and more. And also, one of the wrestlers said this also. He was going into psychosis. Dan said this. Due to his drug and alcohol abuse, self-medicating is what it's called. When you're starting to take medications that are not prescribed for you, classic term is self-medication. Why? You're having problems focusing. Not good. Robbie Calabrese said he was bleeding from his nose. He was cutting his arms, cutting into the furniture, bugs on him. That's called drug-induced psychosis. When you start doing that, when you start becoming that paranoia, cutting on yourself, cutting the furniture around you, cutting up, you got a problem. That's drug-induced psychosis. And one of the wrestlers said to him, Dan Shade said, I tried to help him. Get help. John breaks down, goes, I need help, I'll get it. Don't leave me, like a brother to him. And Dave Schultz, he tried as well to help him out because he realized he's not well. He's not doing well. And that was the problem. And this was the brother of Mark Schultz, but he realized also things were awry, things were not going well. You needed to make changes. Okay. Also what happened is that Tony, one of the wrestlers, made a comment. We wanted to file a petition to get him admitted short term, But the rub, okay, this was the long story, the lawyer said this, the rub was they would have to testify against him. And they realized that if they did that, they'd be off the property and then going back to scraping by. They did not want to live like that. So no witnesses, no petition. This is another problem as well that came up. Like, you think you have control and stability, but you don't. And for these wrestlers to testify against him, John would have taken it as an act of betrayal, an act of disloyalty, and he would have gone ahead and kicked them off the property. Going back to working at Walmart, trading 2 hours a night when you're exhausted, doesn't work. His ex-wife, Gail, said John's whole way of life was either he brought his way in or he bought his way out. And you know what happens in the end? You believe you can do anything. Anything goes. Anything can happen. Robbie Calabrese, I never believed he was going to hurt anybody. Gail, the ex-wife, said she had domestic violence charges that he did to her. She didn't charge him. She left because he said to her that if she realized if she stayed with him, he was going to kill her. Seeds of violence were already there long before the wrestlers. What I want to clarify also is when you're angry, when you're ticked off, when you're frustrated, when you're bitter, it's not the end act that's the final catalyst. It's the beginnings way before. The seeds were already there. He was seething. He was angry. He was frustrated. And because of that, he was ultimately going to take it out on somebody as his life was crumbling mentally. He was going to make everyone around him pay. The wrestlers report that there were guns at dinner, guns all over the farm, recipe for disaster. John became more paranoid. It was all normal. You know, what are my rights? You never know. We're starting to come out of this thing now. Taras Wolchuk made a comment. Tony made a comment, one of the wrestlers. He said, by 1994, my role began to take care of John. Not to become a better wrestler, but I would go to the house, they called the big house, and he would be there sound asleep. And one time he's there sound asleep, but he said, John, please come over. And what does he do? He wakes up, there's a gun in his face. Literally. John du Pont had put a gun on the side of his face, and he was shaking, his eyes were red. He puts a machine gun to the wrestler's face, and he says, John, I'm just your friend. I'm your friend. Don't you? And then John goes, don't you blanket me. I want you off this farm. And then he just leaves. Dan Shade, the wrestler, said, I told the other guys, it's over. We have to leave. It's not worth it. Someone's going to get killed. And no one was willing to admit that the dream was over. This is an important thing in life also. You need to have someone around you in your life that's objective for you. What's a real friend? A real friend is someone that tells you the truth. Not tells you fantasies, not tells you what you want to believe, tells you the truth. Anyone watching this video, I recommend you find a real friend. Because if you do, you're very, very lucky. That will tell you the truth about who and what you are. Because if you live your life of fantasy, so many entertainers, musicians, athletes, they get to that point where they believe they can do anything. They can do anything insane, anything crazy, till it comes crashing down on them. And John didn't have anybody. He had a lawyer. If you think about it, it wasn't his friend, just to monitor him. The wrestlers, in his mind, were friends. They really weren't his friend. He didn't have a friend. He didn't have anybody. He only had his mother, who was very cold, domineering, caustic. She dies. He's rudderless. He has nothing to hold on to, and that's when you lose all perspective. That's what happened to John. And all these wrestlers are finally kind of waking up. Hello. But until you have someone who can say to you objectively, what do? Bruce Muffson, legendary LCSW, I talk to people all the time to get their thoughts. I don't think I know everything, because I don't. And if I ever start to get to that point that I'm a legend in my own mind, there's a problem. There's a problem. And I recognize that and I realize that. And no one was willing to admit that the dream was over. And you need to have someone around you that can be objective, that can say to you, this makes no sense, let's get out of here. Now there's a great scene, there's a great line where they go to a competition overseas, and I believe it's held in Monaco, if I remember correctly, and the Prince of Monaco sends a letter to Dave Schultz and says to him, come wrestle for me. I'll do the same thing that you're doing at Foxcatcher. I know he's very, very wealthy. He's a du Pont, but I'm quite wealthy myself. Prince of Monaco. You can wrestle for my team, my country, whatever. And Dave Schultz sends back a letter saying, I already wrestled for the Prince of Pennsylvania. Hence the name of the documentary. And the other wrestlers were saying to him, to Dave, let's take the offer, take the offer, take the offer. I wrestle for the Prince of Pennsylvania. Thank you, but no thank you, Prince. So Mark Schultz goes like this. Dave had a chance to win the gold in 1996. That was going to be Atlanta. He could have gone. He could have won it. He was peaking as a wrestler. And Tony said, John could have actually had a real champion. John could have had the culmination of the dream that he never had, but he got so paranoid he couldn't enjoy it. Here's the thing about life, guys. I came today from a funeral. Young girl passed away. Devastating. Very painful to go to. Life snuffed out. And I'm telling you, when you lose focus, you lose objectivity, you lose the chance to enjoy life, becoming paranoid over silly things, you've wasted your life. Life goes by like that, very quickly. And to throw it away, to give it away? Why? Don't do it. Get on terra firma. Get on reality. And here's what happened also. Dave Schultz was a challenger. He didn't let you go. He didn't let you slide by. He had a way of saying things to you to challenge you that forces you to look inside yourself. And John did not have good self-control. He couldn't handle criticism. He couldn't handle it. Too intense. So what happened is that they had a party, and this is the beginning of the end. Tony DeHaven says this. We had a party, and he was the one that was basically John's handler. We had a party at a wrestler's house, and Dave was firing bottle rockets towards the big house. John took him out and said, I now know who the threat in the farm is, and I will get rid of it. This is what happens when paranoia becomes real to you, and you act out on it. This is what mental illness looks like. You have lost total control, and no one was there to stop it. He began to fantasize that Dave Schultz was the threat because he was firing off bottle rockets, just goofing around towards the big house. But John took it as the threat. You've lost all objectivity. And when you see mental illness for real, that's what it looks like. When you lose objectivity. When you're no longer rational, when you're no longer thinking straight. Threats, paranoia, not sleeping. Here's how it ends. On January 26, 1996, John pulled up to Dave's house. He was there with his wife. He was working on his car. His kids were in the house. He says, you got a problem with me? To Dave. And then he shot him twice. Now, Dave tried to placate him. John, I'm your friend. Please, don't do this. Then he shot him a third time, and he killed him. And in the documentary, everyone's listening to the 911 call. There's a look of anguish. And Mark Schultz, the brother, is relieving the grief of his brother's death the last few moments in agony and leaving behind 2 young children. Well, you can understand what happened. After the death, who cared about wrestling anymore? Robbie Calabrese said after that, who cared about training or the wrestling? In February 1997, John du Pont was found guilty of third-degree murder. The court ruled that he was mentally ill but not insane. Big distinction. I want to clarify this. He was mentally ill but not at the time of the murder. This is often brought up in court. He was mentally ill at the time of the murder, but he was not insane the rest of the day or his life. Big, big difference. Mentally ill that day, but he was not insane. That's the term they use, that the rest of that day or the rest of his life. And that's often brought up in court. This is often argued in trials. Was he competent during his criminal act? And what they're ruling is he was competent. So mental illness is a disease, a disorder. We get that. but it doesn't stop you from being punished if you do things that are inappropriate. Big, big difference between true psychotic behavior that you have all day long and someone that does an action when they're having a really horrible day, clearly a depression, a breakdown, but that's not going to make you non-competent. So John du Pont was found competent for his actions and given third-degree murder charges and spent the rest of his life in prison. He was sentenced to 30 years in jail, and there's a picture of him in the documentary with a long beard and a wheelchair. Obviously, the lawyers are trying to do whatever angle they can. Understandable. And the lawyer ends up like this. Taras Wolchuk says, John spent much of his life trying to get out of the shadow of the du Pont family. And now the family is trying to get out of the shadow of John. He died in December 2010 at the age of 72. What do we learn from this documentary? What do we learn from this video? Mental illness does not get better. It gets worse if it's untreated. John was dealing with depression, drug and alcohol abuse, acute stress, poor sleep, and essentially also what direction his life was going to take. Who was he? They call trying to figure out, there's a term they use, trying to figure out, what is your goal? What is your future? One of the reasons why we put these videos together was we want to give people an understanding of what prevention is. That doesn't have to get to this point where you have nothing to show for it. And again, the last scene of the documentary is one of the wrestlers went back to Foxcatcher. They tore everything down, and while he was there, they were going to make it into homes, condominiums. It was going to become a housing development. All that, the barn that they converted and the training center was being torn down for housing. Gone. No more memories. Don't want to see it. Don't want to deal with it. John was dealing with all of these phase of life they call it. That's the kind of disorder it is. Well, where are you at in your phase of life? These videos are designed to get people to start talking on a realistic perspective on trying to deal with things before they blow up, before they become explosive, before they tear families apart. And John was untreated because no one wanted to step in and say, this is craziness, this is madness. He needs to be evaluated. He probably needed medication. He probably needed inpatient services. He probably needed therapy. He needed help. He had multiple mental health issues that were untreated and undiagnosed. But I could see that from my end very quickly just from watching a documentary. How many people around you are living like this and no one says anything? To me, it's insanity that you have to live like that. And you shouldn't have to live like that. And if you watch something from mental illness, go get help. Don't internalize it. Don't take your anger out on other people. Don't become what you hate about yourself, what you saw around you. Become a different person. All of us have the capacity for great things if we realize what we're suffering from and how to grapple, how to fight, how to wrestle in a sense with our inner demons and not to give in to them, not to give in to the dark side, to the black side, but the life of hope and promise and enjoyment. Because as I saw today from where I went this morning, life in a blink of an eye. So in closing, again, please, we want your comments. We want your thoughts about this video, our other videos. This is Sunridge of Nevada. This is Bruce Muffs and LCSW. We are coming out with more product. We're coming out with our first product. We want you to enjoy it. Coming out other things as well. We love the responses. Keep on calling. And thank you, everyone, for watching these videos. You're all great. Thank you.